Okay guys, so we're going to get this first problem going. Our goal here is to get the solution 635. So your goal when you do Gauss-Jordan elimination is always to get what we call the identity matrix, which is the identity, and the identity matrix looks like this for a 3 by 3. This is a 3 by 3. Oh, I didn't talk about that either. So when I say 3 by 3, I'm talking 3 rows by 3 columns. Okay, so what that means is there are 1, 2, 3 rows and 1, 2, 3 columns. Technically, this is a 3 by 4 matrix. If you use the augmented, so this is a 3 by 4, and our goal here is to get a 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1 in this column, or I'm sorry, in this matrix. And then for this, we want to get 6, 3, and 5 to come out over here. And the reason I know this is because I have the solution written right here on the side. Okay, and that will be the resulting one. So we're going to do a bunch of work right now. Follow along the best you can. What I need you to notice first is we want a 1 in this first column, or I'm sorry, in this first row, first column. There's a 3 there. We have two options. We can divide everything in that first row by 3, or multiply by 1/3, which is one of the things I said you could do in the last video. Or we can swap rows. So let's swap row 1 and 2. Row 2. So let's do that. We have 1, 1, 2, 19, 3, 1, 2, 31, 1, 3, 2, 25. Okay. So we've done one row operation. We've swapped rows 1 and 2. And now we have the following matrix. So now we've got that 1 in that position. We need to get zeros underneath it. That's basically the goal. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that third rule we talked about. 1 times what gives me, okay, so we want to multiply the top one by something, add it to this row, and make this a 0. So what do we need to multiply it by? We need to do -3 times row 1, add it to row 2, and then replace row 2. Okay, we do not want to replace row 1 because we have that 1 in that position that we wanted. And then similarly, we need to get rid of this 1 down here. So we're going to multiply by -1 times row 1, add it to row 3, and replace row 3. Okay, so let's do that real quick. 1, 1, 2, 19. Notice I've written this row again because that row does not change. And now I'm going to multiply row 1 by -3. Is going to give me, I'm just going to write out what it is. -3 times 1 is going to be -3. -1 times 3 is -3. -3 times 2 is -6. -3 times 19 is 57. So -57. Okay. Now we've got that written down. We're going to add that to row 2. So we've got -3 plus 3 up here. That's going to be 0. That's what we wanted. That's how you know that you did this step correctly. You want to get zeros underneath this first row. First column, I'm sorry. The 1. We have -3 plus 1. That's going to be -3 plus 1 is -2. -6 plus 2 is -4. And -57 plus 31 is -26. I want to make sure I get this right for you. Okay, so that one is taken care of. Now we're going to do -3 times row 3. And that's going, or I'm sorry, not times row 3, times row 1. We're going to add it to row 3. Okay, so we're going to do it again, the same thing. -3, I'm sorry, we're not doing -3. What am I talking about? I wrote down what we're doing. We're doing -1 times row 1. -1 times row 1 is -1. -1 times 1, -1, -1 times 1 is -1. -1 times 2 is -2, and then -1 times 19 is -19. Okay, now we're going to add this to row 3. This and this is 0. -1 plus 3 is 2. Next one is -2 and 2 is 0. And then negative 19, and 25, I believe, is 6. Okay, so far so good. So now we've done the first set of operations, we've taken care of this. Once you have that appearing, you can start moving to the next column. Now, this one will need to be a 0. Everything after this one will be a 0, so we need to change that to a 0. And then we need to change this 2 to a 0, but we're going to work one column at a time. So I'm going to get rid of this writing I've done. 0 and 0. All right. A good thing to do in this case would be to move this. So notice this is 0, 2, 0. That's what we want for the middle column, middle row. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap row 3 with row 2. Okay. So we have 1, 1, 2, 19. We now have row 3, 0, 2, 0, 6, and 0, negative 2, negative 4, negative 26. Okay. Now, we want to get a 1 in this position because we want it to look like this matrix where there's a 1 here. So we can multiply row 2 by 1/2, and we get the following: 1, 1, 2, 19. 0, half of 2 is 1, half of 0 is 0, half of 6 is 3. Okay, and then 0, negative 2, negative 4, negative 26. Now, you don't always have to make that a 1 before you begin working. If you notice, this is 2, this is negative 2, we could technically add row 2 to row 3, and then simplify, and it would save us a little bit of time, but we're going to just do it this way because I'm trying to show you everything we can do. Now, we have a 1 here, we want to get a 0 here, and a 0 here. So we're going to do row 2, so we're going to multiply row 2 by something, add it to row 1, yield row 1, and then we're going to do row 2 times something, add it to row 3, and yield row 3. What do I need to multiply row 2 by to add to row 1? Well, this is 1, this is positive 1, so we need to multiply by negative 1. And this is 1, and this is negative 2, so I want this to be 0, so I need to multiply this by 2, because 2 plus negative 2 is 0. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to leave row 2 alone, 0, 1, 0, 3. And then I am going to, sorry, my dog's barking. I hope you can't hear her. Anyways, we are going to perform the operations from the last row, or I'm sorry, from the right here and here. And we're going to add it to row 1, and then get row 1, and then add to row 3 and get row 3. So we're going to do negative 1 times row 2. So negative 1 times row 2 is going to be 0. Negative 1 times 0 is 0. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Negative 1 times 0 is 0. And negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. Okay, we're going to add this to every entry in row 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. We're looking here. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. And negative 3 and 19 is going to be 16. Okay. We're going to do this again. We have 2 times row 2 is equal to 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 0 is 0, and 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, we're adding this to row 3. 0 plus 0 is 0. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. That's what we wanted. 0 plus negative 4 is negative 4. And 6 plus negative 26 is negative 20. Okay. Now we're almost there. The next goal, if we look up here, we want to get a 1 in this position. This is going to work out very nicely because we can see that 4 and negative 20 are multiples of each other. We're going to multiply by negative 1/4 or divide by 4. That's another way you could say that. Times row 3 to get a 1 in this position. So we have 1, 0, 2, 16, 0, 1, 0, 3, 0, 0. Okay, 1/4 of 4 is 1. That's what we wanted. And negative 20 divided by negative 4 is 5. That's what we wanted. Okay. Now, we want a 0 in this position and this position. Well, luckily, there's already one here. We only need to get rid of this 2. And to do that, we're going to use row 3. We're going to add it to row 1, and we're going to yield row 1. What do I need to multiply this 1 by to get rid of this positive 2? That would be a negative 2. We're just doing the opposite. And so we're going to do negative 2 times row 3. Let me do it in the next step. So 0, 1, 0, 3, 0, 0, 1, 5. And this is the row that's going to change, so I'm going to do negative 2 times row 3 is going to equal 0, 0, negative 2, negative 10. If you don't see that, I've just done negative 2 times all this. And then we're going to add each entry into this one up here, and we have 0 plus 1 is 0, or I'm sorry, is 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0, and then negative 10 plus 16 is 6. And so what you can see is if we look up here, that was what I said originally we wanted to get for our answer. And so we have completed the operation. All that this says is, notice this is the x column, this is the y column, this is the z. This says x equals 6, 1x equals 6. Okay, or I could write it as 1x, 0y plus 0z is equal to 6. I could say 0x plus 1y plus 0z is equal to 3, and I could say 0x plus 0y plus 1z is equal to 5, which ultimately gives us 6, 3, 5 as our entry, and it is 1 point. And so what this indicates is that 3 lines in space intersect at the point 6, 3, 5. And that is the only place that they intersect. I know this video was kind of long. This process does take time. The best advice I can give you is to practice, guys. Thank you.